Thank you all for being here. My name's Lara Mitofsky, and I'm here with Tim Hanley and Bobby G. And Tim and I are in a new bass clarinet duo called Double Bass, and we're really excited to be working with our colleague and friend Bobby. And we just want to talk a little bit about our process of like exploring close collaboration with composers that we work with. So we're excited to be working on this new piece, The Edge of All I Know, with Bobby. And we've kind of programmed this piece to kind of like sandwich in between two other pieces by Kyle Hobatter. And my original idea for this was kind of sounds cheesy, but basically like Bobby and Kyle are both like really awesome, like nice, genuine people. So it makes it even more special to put their pieces together. And we're kind of exploring like what composer performer collaboration looks to us. So a lot of times you'll approach a composer, or a composer will approach a performer, and you decide to do a piece together, and then they go write the piece, and then you come back together and maybe you play it once for them, and kind of like that's that. It's not always done that way, and there's a lot of times it's more collaborative, but for ourselves, we're exploring making it a lot more collaborative, how it looks like, how involved can we be as performers, working together, getting together multiple times while a piece is being written, things like that. So we kind of started off with showing Bobby those other pieces by Kyle, and seeing how we can all fit this together. So I think I'm going to pass the mic to Bobby now, so you can talk about the piece and everything.
Yay. Thanks, Lara. And hello, everyone. Yeah, I guess to briefly introduce myself, I'm Bobby. I'm a composer doing my PhD at Princeton right now. And yeah, when Lara first approached me about this, I guess, I don't know, I was initially sort of unsure of what I should begin to write about, just because for the most part, I've been interested in like large ensemble things and that kind of thing. But if there's one thing that's meant a lot to me with writing chamber music and all, it's been this notion of communication and how players and chamber players can sort of play off one another in what to me feels like these really interesting ways that feel so much more nuanced and exciting than just like a conductor beating time and that kind of thing. And so yeah, I began to just think more and more about like what I guess to myself, I guess what I would want to do or begin to do with the bass clarinet duo. And so I guess I figured I would start just by sort of sharing a little bit about my thoughts on, or my ideas, I guess, for the piece, and noting that I think when it comes to like collaboration and all that with musicians and performers, one thing that has always been exciting to me to sort of play off this notion of communication is, I guess, like trying to make it like our piece, if that makes sense. And so one thing that Lara and Tim and I did was I feel like I got to talk with them fairly extensively just about my ideas and sort of poetic meanderings about the piece and all of that, which I'm going to share with y'all. So yeah, it's called the piece as it currently stands, is called The Edge of All I Know, and it draws on this poet named Christian Wiman, who's meant an awful lot to me lately. I not to delve into anything too personal, but I think for myself, there's been a lot of sort of majorly sort of faith-shaking moments that have happened for me, like in my life within the last year, 2 years, 3 years or so. I grew up, sort of going to church and all that kind of thing, and for myself, it was something I took very seriously. And this poet, Christian Wiman, was someone who I felt wrestled with these rather difficult themes of faith, loss of faith, and all that, in these very earnest and just really like real and thoughtful ways that to me spoke a lot. Yeah, it just spoke a lot to me, because I think I've always gotten tired of church and not to harp on too much, but things like church platitudes and all that. So I'm just going to read a quick poem, or a couple of quick quotes, I guess, by Christian Wiman. He has this book called My Bright Abyss, where he writes about his own his journey of faith, or lack thereof, which I found very compelling. And it goes, my God, my bright abyss, into which all my longing will not go. Once more I come to the edge of all I know, and believing nothing, believe in this. And so I found that to be a very just compelling kind of image. Just thought that when we look, or yeah, when faith sort of gets stretched to this breaking point and all that, it feels that we're coming to the edge of it feels like we come to the edge of ourselves and the edges of all of what we can begin to perceive and everything and all. And at that point, it feels, I don't know, on some level, like a precipitous kind of choice between belief and unbelief and all of that. I'm going to read another quote. This is a fair bit longer, but one that was meaningful for myself, just to sort of illustrate an idea of what the heck, where the heck this piece is coming from. And so it's a lengthier paragraph, so bear with me here, but it goes, what you must realize, what you must even come to praise, is the fact that there is no right way that is going to become apparent to you once and for all. The most blinding illumination of faith that strikes and perhaps radically changes your life will be so attenuated and obscured by doubts and dailiness that you may one day come to suspect the truth of that moment at all. The calling that seemed so clear will be lost in echoes of questionings and indecision. The church that seemed to save you will fester with egos, complacencies, banalities. The deepest love of your life will work itself like a thorn in your heart until all you can think of is plucking it out. Wisdom is accepting the truth of this, courage is persisting with life in spite of it, and faith is finding yourself in the deepest part of your soul, in the very heart of who you are, moved to praise it. And so I found this like very, very moving and just very, very is true to sort of where I was coming from as I began, I think from just this whole year in life as it's been. And there was sort of the impetus behind this, I guess, yeah, this piece, The Edge of All I Know. And so this was the kind of thing that to tell all of this to you, this is the stuff that I talked about with somewhat with Lara and Tim, just to sort of help them get into this kind of, I guess, my composerly headspace and sort of where I'm coming from and trying to write, or what the idea is, and trying to produce, write a piece like this. And so from there, after sort of, you know, putting around these like ideas and these sort of high-minded, lofty philosophical thoughts of what a piece is, what a piece can be, what this piece is going to be. The next thing that we talked a fair amount about was, yeah, like this notion of how we're going to shape that, the sort of abstract notions of what the music would be like into like, well, actual sounds for, because, you know, I mean, at the end of it, as philosophical as composition gets, at the end of it, it's still like playing notes and all of that, right? And so, yeah, I have a few pieces or reference tracks that I thought would be kind of fun, and more fun to share, just to sort of helping to evoke or explain some ideas of where the piece is going. And yeah, so I'm just going to share my screen, and one thing that I want to note is well, yeah, I will explain more shortly. Okay, here we go. Great. So this is a piece that's meant an awful lot to me, and one that I've just found to be, I'm sort of conceiving of as a model for how this particular piece for Lara and Tim will go. I'm just going to play it first and then talk a little bit about why this piece came to mind, especially for this particular for this subject matter. Great. So it's sort of this like minute-long hallelujah, which I didn't realize until after I heard it the first time. But I guess what was exciting to me about it was, well, first of all, there's essentially two parts, right? There's a melodic part, the soloist, the duplum, and then there's this drony kind of part, I guess, that's is played or sung by the tenors. And I thought that that would be a fun and just simple texture to directly translate to a bass clarinet duo. One thing that I liked about it, especially, was this notion of the sort of freedom of rhythm and communication that happens here between the two parts, the duplim and the tenors, where essentially the duplim is sort of guiding, the whole arc and the kind of pacing of the piece, but then they cue the tenors to sort of know when to come in or when to change syllables, from like ah to le to lu to ya, right? And that to me was something that I just found really exciting, and that I thought would translate very neatly into the sort of framework of two bass clarinets. Yeah, so all of this to say, this is all just stuff that I sort of kicked around with Tim and Lara as sort of this, as part of, I guess, the collaborative process, and to try and come up with a way, or to try to make it feel more organic and more, yeah, I don't know, more of a partnership, I suppose, in developing a piece. With that, I will pass things off to Tim for a little bit. I realize I've talked a lot, but that's just, yeah. So Tim, you can take it away. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Bobby. So yeah, it was really great to start working with Bobby and Lara so early on this process. When we pitched the idea to him, and then he came in with all these wonderful ideas and headspace and references to get started. And then one thing that I really liked that we did is we got together with coffee and sat down and talked to him about the things that we like to play, not just what he wants to hear, but he wanted to know, what are things that you enjoy what to play, and here are these reference ideas and recordings that I like. How do you think they would translate? And so we kind of got onto the idea of trying to see how we could maybe blend some of the cool, bass clarinet-y things that we all love to do, with some like interesting multiphonics or low drones and all kinds of stuff, and blend it into the sound world that Bobby is having in his head. And so we discussed, I think the word that came up was ingredients. Like maybe we would send him, we'll try this sound and see, does this fit what you're looking for? Yes, no. Maybe here's this other thing that you can try. And we've discussed, even though we're still early in the processes of getting this piece, we want to be involved all the way, kind of like Lara talked about at the beginning. So as Bobby, throws things around and gets, even a measure or two of draft or sound ideas to then send it to us, or get together, depending on where we all are in the world, to like, can we play this for him? Does this sound the way that you wanted? And also, like, is it comfortable for us? Because he doesn't want to write anything that we don't want to play, and vice versa. I've personally encountered several times when working with some composers that it's like some of them will just write something and they want to hear it the way they wrote it, and there's no input the other way around. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But probably my favorite thing about this collaboration so far is from the very get-go, we've been able to just like, I want to do this, I don't want to do this. Here are the other things on our program. How can you fit into that? And this collaborative process from the very beginning, I think, and I hope, and I believe will produce a really, truly cool piece for us to play. Laura, did you have anything you wanted to add on to that?
Well, one thing I forgot to say before was Kyle bases a lot of his pieces on poetry. So that was the one thing we had told Bobby when we started this out. So I thought it was really cool that you, Bobby, picked poetry to base this off of, and then like kind of made the piece your own. I think it was just kind of coincidence that I love like chant music, which was cool. But also like we've been bouncing other sounds to each other too. Like there's some like a Barry sax duo piece we really like by Shelley Washington, right? And Bobby was like, can bass clarinets do these like crazy multiphonic sounds? And like we were like, totally. But yeah, I mean, like we're basically just still exploring, like, like when a composer writes a piece, it's like, it's kind of like about like, this is how the composer writes and this piece is their piece. And so we're still all asking each other questions like, like, Bobby, how much can we be a part of this? Like, do you want to send us snippets as you're in the process and have our thoughts, or like, so it's kind of like getting to know each other and seeing what everyone is comfortable with to create a process that works for us all. And I also just want to say, like, if anyone else wants to jump in that aren't Tim, me, or Bobby with any questions or thoughts, like, feel free. But yeah, I'll just pass it back to you.
Yay,
Or Bobby.
yeah. I mean, I guess one thing was one thing that's been helpful and exciting for myself with all of the, with like, I guess, collaborations in the past and with this particular one is, well, we've been talking about this whole notion of like reference tracks and all of that. And yeah, I'm sort of hearing or getting the chance to hear what kinds of techniques Tim and Lara can do in the first place, just because, I mean, as Tim noted about ingredients, it's just helpful for myself to know. And I don't know, I think it's fun sort of helping like the whole ensemble achieve this, because I don't know, this kind of, or this point where we all sort of have an idea of what the piece sounds like together, even without it necessarily being written or without it existing in any extant form. I think a lot of the time, what can be sort of frustrating, I think, in the whole process is like the composer has this idea, this like sort of sound that they're trying to achieve or something, and then and the performers are left kind of completely in the dark over of what that actual sound is, and it's basically until they're just suddenly handed this like big intimidating looking score with all these terrifying notation or or extended techniques and all that's being called for. And I guess what we thought would be important and valuable in sort of building something together would be this idea of like, instead of having just the composer having this kind of utopic vision of like what the piece is going to be floating somewhere in the ether, that all three of us can sort of, at least in this case, can sort of share or have like a kind of a grasp of what that idea or sound or piece is going to be or look like, well before it's even written, or well before it exists, or anything like that. So on that note, I figured I could also share the other reference track, the Barry Sax duo by a classmate and good friend of mine, Shelley Washington. Yeah, I can share a little bit just to give an idea, just talk a little bit more about what it is that I'm thinking about. And yeah, so for this particular piece, like I thought it would be really, since the whole point of it is this whole idea of kind of faith lost, faith being searched for, and I guess this notion of I don't know, it's this kind of wistful kind of sense of spiritual loss or something, but also yearning or searching, instead of just simply writing out some kind of chanty Gregorian piece or something for two bass clarinets. I thought it'd be exciting and interesting to do, as Tim and Lara have noted, like these like more bass clarinet-y sounds and whatnot. And so the one thing that I really liked with one thing that I've heard before in this like Barry Sax duo is this like super kind of dirty, overtone heavy kinds of waves or sounds that, what Shelley calls overtone waves. I'm just gonna play this a little bit and just to give an idea of what this sounds like. And one thing that I invite you all to consider is this idea of like imagine like this sort of drony, dirty texture and all, and also some kind of like quasi-holy chant style melody sort of floating above it, as if to suggest some kind of spiritual or some kind of the sacred interacting with the I don't want to say profane, as it were, but sort of the profane, if you will. Here's how it goes. I'm a big fan of this piece. Yes, so that particular kind of drony, dirty kind of sound, how that might engage with I guess these long line kind of beautiful chant-like melodies, are sort of the basic idea for the piece as it was initially conceived. And then, yeah, I guess having the sort of the two players, having Tim and Lara kind of exchange roles back and forth instead of just one person doing the drone the whole time and one person doing the melody the whole time. Maybe at different points they'll switch roles or switch back and forth. Just sort of feels this, I don't know, more interactive, more interesting, and yeah, just something about the role of like, or these characters of like faith and the profane or something interacting in more complex ways than just, you know, having them be totally separate. Yes. So those are the ideas of the piece as they now stand. And I think, and hopefully the point of all this and being able to talk and talking so extensively about a piece that essentially does not yet exist is to sort of see whether it's possible for well, I guess Tim and Lara, and then for all of y'all who are listening to be able to conceive of the idea of like, oh yeah, I can kind of envision this piece now. I can sort of hear what it's going to look like and what it would be like. And then to sort of try to, and then I guess in sharing this stuff with Tim and Lara as well, to sort of invite them into the process of, you know, how can they contribute their kinds of sounds, their expertise on the instruments to facilitate the kind of sound or the kind of piece that I'm hoping to create. Like I have no idea if the bass clarinet can do like the sort of blah, la, 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 kinds of, you know, overtone rich kind of heavy sounds that I want. I hope it can, and I figure it would be able to. But that's sort of, and that's, I think, sort of the whole joy of this particular collaboration is figuring out the idea together, and then all of us bringing sort of our personalities and our expertise and our sounds and whatnot to it to try and make something to make it work. Cool. That is what I have to say. I feel like I talked a lot, but cool.
Yeah, so we're still like figuring out how it all looks and how often we want to get together. We're all like recently transplanted in New Jersey and like here for at least the foreseeable future, or at least a few years for all of us. So yeah, so we just want to talk about it, and I think we're supposed to like open it up for questions now, right, Jessica? And it's almost over, I think. So
yeah, thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? I see one from Kelsey here. What are the plans for the piece as far as when you'll expect it to be done, performed, recorded? I think it's interesting using the organum as an inspiration. I'm teaching music history, and we've talked a lot about chant, and I'd love to show my students a modern interpretation when that's available.
That's a great question.
So they're not ready for that yet. That's okay. Early stages is good. I did have a question for you. Yeah. I was really curious about the sonic possibilities of bass clarinet duo and what that sort of means for you as a composer going into this piece, because it's a really unique, but also not unique sound to each. Obviously, they're both different. So do you envision a situation where even though the timbre of the instruments is equal, do you find yourself trying to find a way to create different sounds simultaneously between the two instruments?
Yeah, I think that's well, I mean, that's one of the things I like I think a lot of composers like so much about bass clarinets is they're so versatile, right? That's a kind of you can, on one hand, you can do the range for starters is just immense. People, I mean, I know that you're told not to write super high notes for the bass clarinet, but people do it anyways. And then besides that, there's just the crazy timbral stuff that's possible. I ended up looking into a lot more about, like, you know, the different kinds of multiphonics that are doable, the different, whether someone's playing more traditional sounds or if someone's creating, like, playing more, I don't know, all the millions of crazy things you can do with multiphonics or slap tongues and whatnot. And so I think what was exciting to me was the possibility of like creating these extremes of like similarity and homogeneity, where, like, you know, they can sound like, for all intents and purposes, the exact same person playing, or they can sound like two vastly different poles of I guess music making or sound, which to me is exciting and interesting, especially I think given the subject matter of this kind of you know, exploring some kind of duality versus unity, you know, faith versus loss of faith, and things splitting and not making sense. So yeah, I guess for myself, this is a very roundabout way of saying the bass clarinet's great because it can make so many different sounds. That's precisely why I think it's attractive to me, like in the setting. It's like, you know, you can have just so many different characters represented even just among two people. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and just for anyone here, do you have a website that they can visit to learn more about your compositional output, or Does the bass clarinet duo have a link or contact information that they'd like to share before we close up the session?
Bobby, why don't you give your website for now? I think that's good.
Sure, I can just drop that in the chat or something. Would that be easier?
Yeah, that's fine.
And
Cool.
also to, well, sort of answer Kelsey's question. I mean, we applied to perform this at Clarinet Fest, so like, fingers crossed, but like whether or not that happens, like chances are the piece will be done by then. So if you're
Yes.
planning, you know, for your academic calendar, I would say, you know, you could incorporate this in the fall, but probably not the spring.